Now let's begin. Oliver Callahan pressed his fingers against his temples, staring at the half-edited documentary footage on his monitor. The story of medical fraud in rural clinics had consumed 6 months of his life, but tonight, concentration eluded him. His phone buzzed. A text from Alexis. "Mom's picking up Jake from school today. Running late at the office." He typed back a thumbs up, though unease prickled his skin. Irene Henderson had never volunteered for pickup duty in the 3 years since they'd moved to Portland. The woman barely tolerated him, her contempt thinly veiled behind forced smiles at family dinners. Oliver had learned to read the calculation in her eyes, the way she'd pause before speaking, as if mentally editing her words to maintain plausible deniability. Their relationship had fractured completely 2 years ago when Oliver's documentary on pharmaceutical price fixing had inadvertently exposed Henderson Medical Group's participation in a kickback scheme. It wasn't the focus of his film, just a footnote, but Irene's husband Richard had been forced into early retirement. The Hendersons never forgave him, though they claimed otherwise. Richard had died 6 months later. Heart attack, they said, and Irene's grief had curdled into something harder. Oliver saved his project and glanced at the clock. 3:47 p.m. Jake would be home by 4:15, chattering about second-grade drama and whatever Pokemon cards he'd traded at recess. The house felt too quiet. Oliver's home office overlooked the street, and he'd positioned his desk specifically to see the driveway. By 4:30, his unease had graduated to concern. He called Alexis. "Hey, has your mom texted you? They're not home yet. Maybe she took him for ice cream?" Alexis sounded distracted, keyboard clicks audible in the background. "You know she spoils him. She hates me enough that she'd avoid being here longer than necessary. Oliver, please. Not everything is about you." Her tone carried that familiar edge, the one that appeared whenever he questioned her family. "She's trying. Just give her a chance." He ended the call and dialed Irene's number. Straight to voicemail. He tried again, and again. By 5 p.m., he called 18 times. He contacted the school. "Yes, Mr. Callahan, Jake left with his grandmother at 3:05, the administrator confirmed. She showed ID and was on the approved pickup list." "Did Jake seem okay? Did he say anything?" "He seemed fine. Excited, actually. Mrs. Henderson said they were going on an adventure." Adventure? The words sat in his stomach like lead. Oliver called Alexis again. "Something's wrong. Your mother isn't answering, and they're not home. It's been 2 hours. Did you check?" "I've checked everything. I called the school. She picked him up at 3 and said they were going on an adventure." "Alexis, when has your mother ever used that word?" Silence. "Then, I'll come home." At 6 p.m., Oliver called the police. They took the information but seemed unconcerned. "Family member, approved pickup, probably just a misunderstanding. Call back if they're not home by 9. Alexis arrived at 6:30, her professional composure cracking. She tried her mother's phone repeatedly, left voicemails that shifted from casual to desperate. They called Irene's friends, her bridge club, her sister in Seattle. No one had seen her. Maybe she had car trouble, Alexis said, pacing their kitchen. Her phone could be dead. For 3 hours? And she wouldn't find a way to call. "What are you suggesting, Oliver?" "That my mother kidnapped our son." "I'm suggesting something is very wrong." They waited. Oliver reviewed everything he knew about Irene Henderson. 62 years old, widow, retired nurse, lived alone in a condo in the Pearl District. She'd been cold to him from their first meeting, but he'd attributed it to overprotectiveness. Only child, daughter marrying a journalist with an unpredictable income. After Richard's death, her coldness had frozen into something absolute. But this was calculated. At 9 p.m., Oliver called the police again. This time they listened. By 10:30, an officer was taking a formal statement. By midnight, an Amber Alert had been issued. Alexis sat on their couch, mascara tracking down her face. She wouldn't hurt him. She loves Jake. Oliver said nothing. He'd learned in his years of investigative work that people were capable of terrible things when they felt justified, and Irene Henderson felt very justified in hating him. At 2:17 a.m., headlights swept across their front window. Oliver was at the door before the knock came. 2 police officers stood on his porch. Behind them, a squad car idled, and in the back seat, Jake. Oliver ran past the officers. His son sat wrapped in a blanket, his face pale but unmarked. Oliver wrenched open the door and pulled him into his arms. "Daddy, Jake whispered. Grandma said to give you something. Where is she? Oliver looked to the officers. We found him walking on Highway 26, about 40 miles west, the older officer said. Near the Glenwood exit. A trucker called it in. Walking? On the highway? At 2 in the morning. He flagged down the truck. Very brave kid. The officer's expression was grim. He says his grandmother dropped him off there and told him to walk until someone stopped. Alexis had appeared behind Oliver, her hand over her mouth. Jake reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a photograph, bent from handling. Grandma said this is for you, Daddy. She said you need to see the truth. Oliver took the photo. His hands began to shake. It showed Alexis, his wife of 8 years, sitting in an unfamiliar restaurant. Across from her sat a man Oliver recognized, Drew Schultz, Alexis's colleague from Henderson Medical Group, the company her father had founded. But this wasn't a business lunch. Alexis's hand covered Drew's on the table, her expression soft in a way Oliver hadn't seen directed at him in years. The timestamp in the corner read 3 months ago. But that wasn't what made his blood run cold. Clipped to the photo was a birth certificate. Jake's birth certificate. Not the one Oliver had in their filing cabinet, but an original, hospital-issued document. Under father, the name wasn't Oliver Callahan. It was Drew Schultz. Alexis screamed. The sound was primal, terrified, not of discovery, but of what came next. Oliver looked at his son, at the boy he'd raised from birth, whose first steps he'd filmed, whose nightmares he'd chased away. Jake's eyes were the same green as Alexis's, but his nose, his chin, the way his ears sat against his head, Oliver had always thought they were from Alexis's side. Now he saw they were from Drew Schultz. Mr. Callahan? The officer stepped forward. Is there something we should know? Oliver's mind worked with the precision that had made him excellent at his job. Irene hadn't abandoned Jake out of cruelty. She'd planned this revelation, timed it perfectly. She'd wanted Oliver destroyed the way he destroyed Richard. Not with violence, but with truth. With the devastation of knowing his entire life was built on a lie. She'd wanted him to lose everything. We need to pack, Oliver said quietly. He handed the photo to Alexis, watching her face crumple. We're leaving. Leaving. The officer frowned. Sir, we need to file a complete report about. My mother-in-law dropped my son on a highway in the middle of the night. I'm taking my family somewhere safe. Oliver's voice was steady, but underneath, calculations were forming. You have her information. You can find her for questioning. But we're not staying here. He lifted Jake, his son, the boy he loved regardless of genetics, and carried him inside. Behind him, Alexis sobbed. The officers exchanged glances, but didn't stop him. Oliver had spent years uncovering other people's secrets, exposing corruption, following trails until the truth emerged. Now he'd been handed his own devastating truth. But unlike his subjects, he wouldn't crumble. Irene Henderson had made a critical mistake. She'd assumed the truth would destroy him. She had no idea what he was capable of when truly motivated. By 4 a.m., their car was packed. By sunrise, they were crossing the Oregon border, heading east. And Oliver Callahan was already planning his revenge. The motel in Boise was cheap, but clean. Jake slept between Oliver and Alexis on the single king bed, his small body a barrier between them. Alexis hadn't spoken since they'd left Portland, hadn't done anything but cry silently and stare at her phone. Oliver knew she was waiting for the call from her mother, the explanation that would make this all make sense. It never came. Oliver sat in the bathroom with the door cracked, laptop balanced on the toilet seat, reviewing everything he could find about Drew Schultz. 34 years old, pharmaceutical sales representative for Henderson Medical Group. Of course he was. Divorced, no children listed on any public records. But then, Jake wouldn't be listed. The birth certificate Oliver had was fraudulent, created to name him as father. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You shouldn't have exposed us, Oliver. This is what you deserve. Irene. She'd used a burner phone, untraceable. Smart. He typed back. You abandoned a 7-year-old child on a highway. You committed a felony. I gave him back to you, didn't I? No harm done. Just showed you the truth about your lying wife. You're welcome. Oliver's jaw clenched. Another text arrived. Drew has been a better father than you anyway. Too bad you'll never see Jake again once Alexis realizes she doesn't need you. He screenshot the conversation and saved it to 3 different cloud services. Then he began researching in earnest. Irene Henderson, born Irene Walsh, raised in Chicago. Nursing degree from Northwestern. Married Richard Henderson in 1978. One daughter, Alexis, born 1990. Richard had built Henderson Medical Group from a single clinic into a regional network of specialty practices. The kickback scheme Oliver had exposed involved physicians referring patients to specific imaging centers and pharmacies in exchange for compensation, illegal and unethical. Richard had claimed ignorance, but internal emails Oliver had obtained told a different story. Richard's death certificate listed cardiac arrest, natural causes. But Oliver remembered the whispers at the funeral, the way Irene had gripped the casket and whispered something Oliver couldn't hear. What if Richard's death wasn't natural? What if the stress of exposure had? No. Oliver stopped himself. That path led to paranoia. Focus on what could be proven. He pulled up Drew Schultz's social media. The man kept his accounts private, but Oliver had resources. He opened his encrypted contact list and sent a message to Marcus Chun, a former colleague who now worked in data recovery. Need a deep background check. Drew Schultz, Portland. Everything, financial, communications, travel. And Irene Henderson. I need to know everywhere she went yesterday. Marcus replied within minutes. This about Jake? Heard the Amber Alert. You okay? Getting there. How fast can you work? Give me 12 hours. Oliver closed the laptop and returned to bed. Jake stirred, reaching for him in sleep. Oliver took his small hand. Daddy. Jake's voice was foggy with sleep. Are we safe now? Yes, buddy. We're safe. Grandma was really scary. She said bad things about you. Oliver's chest tightened. What kind of things? She said you stole me from my real daddy. She said you're a liar who hurts people. Jake's eyes opened, bright in the dim light. But you're my daddy. Right. Always, Oliver said. Nothing changes that. Alexis stirred on the other side of Jake. Oliver, she whispered. We need to talk. In the morning. No. Now. She carefully extracted herself from the bed and went to the bathroom. Oliver followed, leaving the door open so he could see Jake. In the harsh fluorescent light, Alexis looked older than her 34 years. I need to explain. You slept with Drew Schultz. You got pregnant. You lied about it for 7 years. What's to explain? It was before we were serious. Before we talked about marriage. Oliver laughed bitterly. We'd been dating for 2 years when you got pregnant. We were living together. You were never around. Alexis's voice rose, then dropped to a harsh whisper. Always traveling for your documentaries. Always chasing the next story. Drew was there. He listened. It was one time, Oliver. One mistake. That created a child. I didn't know. I thought. I hoped. She stopped. The timing was close enough. I convinced myself you were the father. Until when? When did you know for sure? Alexis's silence was answer enough. You've known all along, Oliver said slowly. Since the paternity test at birth. No. They did a blood type test for Jake, and I suspected. But I never confirmed it. I didn't want to know. But your mother knew. How? I told her. When I suspected. She said to never tell you. That it would destroy our family. Alexis grabbed his arm. Oliver, please. I love you. Jake loves you. We can get past this. Your mother abandoned our son on a highway because I exposed your father's crimes. Crimes he committed, Alexis. Crimes that hurt people. He was under so much pressure. The company was struggling, and he made bad choices. But you destroyed him. You put it all in your documentary like he was some villain. He was a villain. He defrauded Medicare for millions. Patients got unnecessary procedures because their doctors were paid to recommend them. And the stress killed him. Alexis's mask finally cracked completely. He had a heart attack 3 weeks after your film premiered. My mother has been alone ever since, and she blames you. We both. She stopped. You both blame me. Oliver stepped back. That's what this is. You've been punishing me for 2 years. I've been trying to forgive you. For doing my job? For exposing fraud. For killing my father. The words hung between them. Jake whimpered from the other room. Oliver pushed past Alexis and returned to his son, gathered him close. Jake's fever-warm face pressed against his neck. Alexis stood in the bathroom doorway, crying again. I didn't mean that. Yes, you did. Oliver's voice was calm now, analytical. Your mother planned this revenge. She knew exactly what would hurt most. But she made a mistake. What mistake? She gave me evidence. That photo, the birth certificate, the text she sent. She committed multiple felonies, child endangerment, kidnapping, criminal negligence. And you He looked at his wife, this woman he thought he knew. You've been lying to me for 7 years. Fraud, falsifying a birth certificate, possibly paternity fraud, depending on state law. You're going to what? Have us arrested? I'm going to make sure I keep my son. The one I've raised, loved, and protected while you and your mother plotted against me. Oliver's phone buzzed. Marcus, already sending preliminary data. Alexis paled. Oliver, please. Think about what you're doing. I am thinking. Very clearly. He kissed the top of Jake's head. Get some sleep, Alexis. Tomorrow, we're going to have a very different conversation. She retreated to the other bed, curling into herself. Oliver held Jake and scrolled through Marcus's initial findings. Drew Schultz had significant debt, gambling, based on the pattern of transactions. Irene Henderson had made multiple large withdrawals over the past month, totaling nearly $50,000. They were planning something bigger than just revealing the truth. They wanted custody of Jake. Oliver smiled in the darkness. They'd shown their hand too early, let emotion override strategy. That was their second mistake. By dawn, he had the skeleton of a plan. By the time Jake woke up asking for breakfast, Oliver knew exactly how this would end. And Irene Henderson, Drew Schultz, and even Alexis would learn what happened when you backed an investigative journalist into a corner. They'd handed him all the ammunition he needed. Now he just had to decide where to aim. 3 days later, they were in Denver. Oliver had rented a small apartment under a corporate name, paying 6 months up front in cash. Jake was enrolled in a new school as Jake Brennan, using falsified documents Oliver had obtained through channels he'd cultivated during years of investigative work. Alexis moved like a ghost through the space, her phone clutched in her hand, waiting for calls that never came. Irene Henderson had vanished. No credit card activity, no cell phone pings, no activity at her condo. Portland police had issued a warrant for her arrest, but finding her was another matter. Oliver knew she'd planned this too. She had resources, connections, and a head start. But Oliver had something better. He had Marcus Chun. Found her. Marcus said over their encrypted video call. Northern Idaho. Little town called Sandpoint. She's using the name Irene Walsh, renting a cabin through a property management company that doesn't ask questions. How'd you find her? She's been calling Drew Schultz's burner phone. He's still in Portland, going to work like normal. Stupid of him, really. Gives us a pattern to track. Marcus shared his screen, showing call logs and cell tower triangulation. Want me to inform the police? Not yet. Oliver leaned back, thinking, what else do you have on Drew? Gambling debts like we thought. $53,000 owed to some very patient creditors. Patient because Henderson Medical Group keeps bailing him out. He's been on the payroll there for 8 years, making way more than a sales rep should. Alexis's father was paying him. Hush money. Probably. After Richard died, Irene took over those payments. But Marcus highlighted a series of transactions. The payments stopped 3 months ago, right around the time that photo was taken of Drew and Alexis together. Oliver saw it then, the full picture. Irene was bleeding money keeping Drew quiet. When she couldn't anymore, she changed tactics. United them both against me. Looks like Drew's been to her condo 6 times in the past 2 months. They're planning something. They want custody of Jake. Drew's the biological father. Alexis is the mother. If they can prove I'm unfit or dangerous, which is why Irene staged that highway incident. Makes you look unstable, fleeing with the kid. Marcus nodded slowly. But she screwed up. She committed felonies on camera. Highway Patrol has footage of her dropping Jake off and driving away. She doesn't know that yet? Footage just came through. Police haven't released it publicly, trying to locate her first. Oliver smiled. Can you delay that release? 48 hours. Oliver, what are you planning? Something poetic. How's your video editing? Rusty, but functional. What? Because I'm going to make a documentary. And everyone involved is going to be a star. Oliver spent the next day filming. He interviewed Jake, gently, asking about that night with Grandma Irene. The boy's story was devastating. How she'd seemed nice at first, bought him ice cream, then driven for hours. How she'd told him Oliver wasn't his real father, that she was taking him to his real family. How she'd eventually gotten angry when Jake cried, pulled over on the dark highway, and told him to walk until someone helped him. I was scared, Daddy, Jake said into the camera. It was so dark and the cars were so fast. Oliver's hands shook holding the camera, but his voice remained steady. You were very brave. Did Grandma say anything else? She said you'd hurt a lot of people and you deserve to lose me. But I don't understand. You help people with your movies, right? You show the truth. I tried to, buddy. He filmed Alexis next, though she refused at first. This is manipulative, Oliver. You can't use our son like this. Your mother used him as a weapon. I'm documenting the truth. Unless you'd prefer I let the police handle it, they'll be very interested in your role in the birth certificate fraud. Alexis paled. I'll do the interview. She sat in front of the camera, mascara already running, and confessed. The affair with Drew had been brief but intense. When she suspected pregnancy, she'd panicked. The relationship with Oliver had been solid but not passionate. His work always came first. Drew had offered her something different: availability, attention, romance. But I loved Oliver, she insisted. I do love him. I made a terrible mistake, but I built a life with him. Jake has been happy. Until your mother decided to destroy that life. She's grieving. She's irrational. She's criminal. Oliver zoomed in on her face. Did you know she was planning to take Jake? No. God, no. She said she wanted to spend time with him. Maybe take him camping. I thought. Alexis broke down. I thought she was finally accepting our family. Did you know about the payments to Drew? Her hesitation was damning. Dad said it was consulting fees. For 8 years? $75,000 annually. For a sales rep? I didn't ask questions. Because you knew, Oliver said softly. You knew it was hush money. You benefited from it. Turn off the camera, Oliver. Please. He did, but the damage was done. On film, Alexis had admitted knowledge of the payments, confirmed the affair, and revealed that Irene had manipulated her into allowing the school pickup. Next, Oliver needed Drew Schultz. Marcus hacked Drew's email, Child's Play, apparently, since Drew used the same password for everything. What they found was explosive. Emails between Drew and Irene going back months, discussing custody strategies. Drew had consulted a lawyer about parental rights. Irene had researched how to prove Oliver was an unfit father, even collecting old articles about his documentary subjects who'd threatened him. But the most damning evidence was recent, a draft custody agreement, prepared by Irene's attorney, granting Drew and Alexis primary custody with Oliver receiving supervised visitation only. The grounds: mental instability, risky profession, and documented history of putting himself in dangerous situations that could endanger the child. They'd been building a case long before that night on the highway. Oliver called Drew from a spoofed number, pretending to be a lawyer interested in his paternity case. Drew, sensing a potential ally, talked freely. Look, I've been paying for that kid for 7 years through Irene, Drew said, his voice tinny through the phone recording. I deserve rights. Oliver Callahan is a reckless journalist who makes enemies. Jake isn't safe with him. What's your relationship with the child? I haven't met him much. Irene thought it was better to wait until we had custody. But he's my son, biologically. That has to count for something. And Alexis? The mother. She's on board. She knows Oliver's dangerous. After what happened with her father, the stress that killed him, she wants Jake away from that life. Oliver had heard enough. He thanked Drew for his time and ended the call. Got it all, Marcus confirmed. This, combined with the highway footage and Jake's testimony, buries them. Not yet, Oliver said. I need one more piece. What's that? I need to confront Irene Henderson face to face. And I need it on camera. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Oliver, that's dangerous. She's already shown she's capable of hurting a child to hurt me. I know. But she thinks she's won. She thinks I'm running, hiding, that the truth destroyed me. Oliver smiled. It's time to show her she's wrong. How are you going to find her without tipping off the police? You're going to tell me exactly where she is. Then I'm going to pay her a visit. Alone. That's insane. Maybe. But she handed me the tools for my revenge. It would be rude not to use them. Sandpoint, Idaho was beautiful in a rustic way, all pine trees and mountain lakes. Irene's rental cabin sat on 3 acres of isolated property, accessible by a winding dirt road. Oliver parked half a mile away and hiked in, his lightweight camera equipment in a backpack. It was early morning, mist still rising from the ground. Through the trees, he saw smoke coming from the cabin's chimney. She was there. Oliver set up a hidden camera in the trees with a clear view of the cabin's front porch, then approached and knocked. Irene Henderson opened the door wearing a thick sweater and holding a cup of coffee. Her face cycled through emotions: shock, fear, anger, before settling on cold satisfaction. Oliver, I wondered how long it would take you to find me. 3 days. You're not as clever as you think. Clever enough to show you the truth about your lying wife. She leaned against the doorframe. How does it feel, knowing Jake isn't yours? He's mine in every way that matters. Biology is just an accident of genetics. Tell that to a judge. Drew Schultz is prepared to file for custody. Full paternity rights. Drew Schultz is a degenerate gambler with $53,000 in debt. He's been extorting you for years. That's not going to play well in court. Irene's smile faltered slightly. He's the biological father. And you committed felony child endangerment. Oliver pulled out his phone, showed her the highway footage Marcus had obtained. This is you, dropping a 7-year-old on a dark highway. The truck driver who found Jake has given a statement. You're looking at 5 to 10 years minimum. No jury would convict a grieving grandmother who was trying to reunite a child with his real father. Is that your defense strategy? Because I think the photo of you driving away while Jake stands alone on the shoulder will be pretty compelling. Oliver stepped closer. But here's what I really want to know, Irene. Why? Was destroying me worth traumatizing your own grandson? You killed Richard. Her composure cracked. Your goddamn documentary put so much stress on him that his heart gave out. You took my husband, destroyed our company's reputation, ruined everything we built. So yes, showing you the truth about Alexis and Jake was worth it. Watching you lose your family the way I lost mine. That was justice. Oliver's hidden camera was recording every word. Richard died because he committed fraud. He hurt people. Patients got unnecessary radiation exposure because he paid doctors to order imaging they didn't need. Children got medications they didn't need because he incentivized prescriptions. He deserved to be exposed. He was trying to save our business. By breaking the law. By hurting people. Oliver's voice hardened. And you've been so focused on revenge that you hurt Jake. A child. Your own grandson. I gave him back. After terrorizing him for hours and abandoning him on a highway in the dark. After telling him I wasn't his real father. After trying to destroy his sense of security and safety. You used a child as a weapon, Irene. Whatever Richard did, whatever I did, Jake was innocent. He deserves to be with his real family. His real family is me. I've been there for every nightmare, every scraped knee, every parent-teacher conference. Drew Schultz has contributed nothing but DNA and blackmail payments. Oliver pulled out a document. This is a custody agreement your lawyer drafted. It restricts me to supervised visitation while granting primary custody to Drew and Alexis. But there's a problem with your plan. What's that? Alexis doesn't want it. She confessed everything. The affair, the payments, your manipulation. It's all on video. Oliver smiled. And Drew? He can't stop talking. Admitted on a recorded call that he's never even met Jake. That this is about money and rights, not the child's welfare. Irene's coffee cup shook in her hand. You're bluffing. I'm a documentarian. Evidence is my specialty. Oliver pulled up the interview files on his phone, showed her clips. See? Everyone talks eventually. Even you just now. Admitted that you abandoned Jake as revenge against me. That's premeditation, Irene. That's malice. You son of a bitch. No, I'm a father. Jake's father. And I'm going to make sure he's never near you again. Oliver turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and one more thing. Richard's heart attack? I pulled his medical records. Turns out his doctors had been warning him about cardiac risk for years. High cholesterol, hypertension, refused to take medication. His death was tragic, but it wasn't my fault. It was his own negligence. He walked away, leaving Irene trembling with rage on her porch. The hidden camera captured it all. Back in Denver, Oliver edited the footage into a 15-minute mini-documentary. Jake's frightened recounting of that night. Alexis's tearful confession. Drew's mercenary attitude about custody. Irene's cold admission of using Jake for revenge. The highway footage showing her abandoning a child. He titled it, Bloodlines and Betrayal, When Family Becomes Weapon. Then he sent copies to the Portland Police Department, the FBI. Interstate child abduction was federal. Alexis's lawyer, Drew's lawyer, the prosecutor handling Irene's case. And, for good measure, every major news outlet in Oregon. The story exploded. Local news ran segments on grandmother's revenge plot. National outlets picked it up because of Oliver's reputation as a documentary filmmaker. The irony wasn't lost on commentators. The man who'd exposed corporate fraud now had his own family's dysfunction exposed. But public sympathy landed squarely with Oliver. A father who'd raised a son for 7 years, discovering betrayal, yet still fighting to protect that child? That resonated. The footage of Jake alone on the highway made people furious. Irene Henderson went from grieving grandmother to monster overnight. Within 48 hours, Irene was arrested in Sandpoint. Drew Schultz was charged as an accessory. His emails with Irene showed foreknowledge of the plan. Alexis, facing potential charges for the fraudulent birth certificate and conspiracy, agreed to cooperate fully. Oliver filed for divorce and emergency custody. His evidence was overwhelming. The judge took one look at the documentary, read Jake's therapist's report about trauma from the highway incident, and granted Oliver primary custody, with Alexis receiving supervised visitation pending psychological evaluation. Drew Schultz's petition for parental rights was denied, the judge noting that a man who'd never met the child and had conspired to traumatize him had no business claiming fatherhood. Irene Henderson pleaded guilty to avoid trial. She received 4 years in prison, with additional civil penalties for the emotional damage to Jake. The revenge was complete. But Oliver felt hollow. 6 months after the trial, Oliver and Jake lived in a small house in Boulder, Colorado. Jake's therapy sessions were going well. Children were resilient, his therapist said, especially with a stable, loving parent. The nightmares had decreased from nightly to once a week. Alexis was out of their lives except for monthly supervised visits she rarely attended. Last Oliver heard, she'd moved to Seattle, working for a tech company. Drew Schultz had filed for bankruptcy and left Oregon entirely. Irene was 3 months into her sentence at a women's correctional facility in Oregon. Oliver hadn't made a new documentary since that night. Instead, he'd been working on something different, a book. Jake's story, yes, but broader. About fatherhood, about what makes someone a parent, about the danger of revenge consuming everyone it touches. Because that was the truth he'd learned. Revenge had worked. He'd won. But winning felt surprisingly empty. Daddy. Jake appeared in the doorway of Oliver's office. Can we go to the park? Sure, buddy. Oliver saved his manuscript and stood. Want to bring your bike? Yeah. Jake ran to get ready, his enthusiasm undiminished despite everything. Oliver watched him go and felt something settle in his chest. Not happiness exactly, but peace. He'd protected his son. He'd exposed the truth. He'd ensured the people who'd hurt Jake faced consequences. That had to be enough. His phone rang. Marcus Chun. Oliver, you need to see this. Marcus sounded urgent. See what? Irene Henderson's prison communications. Someone requested them through FOIA, and they're concerning. Oliver's peace evaporated. Send them over. The emails arrived minutes later. Irene had been writing to someone, messages routed through her lawyer, keeping the recipient's identity obscured. But the content was clear. He thinks he's won. He thinks it's over. But he took everything from me. My husband, my daughter, my freedom. I won't forget. When I get out, he'll understand what it means to truly lose everything. Another email, more recent. I found someone who understands. Someone with reason to hate Oliver Callahan as much as I do. Together, we'll make sure he pays for what he's done. Not quickly, slowly, starting with what he loves most. Oliver's hands went cold. Marcus, who's she talking to? Working on it. But Oliver, there's more. Richard Henderson's death certificate. I had a friend in forensics look at it. The autopsy was incomplete. They noted unusual markers, but didn't investigate because the death was ruled natural causes. What kind of markers? Consistent with digitalis poisoning. It mimics heart attack symptoms. Oliver sat down heavily. She killed him. Her own husband. Maybe. Or maybe Richard really did have a heart attack, and the markers are coincidental. But if Irene killed Richard and blamed you? Marcus trailed off. Then she's capable of anything. Oliver looked toward Jake's room. I need to know who she's communicating with. And I need to know now. Give me 6 hours. Oliver hung up and went to Jake, who was putting on his shoes. His son, innocent and trusting, excited about a trip to the park. The child he'd fought so hard to protect. Irene Henderson was in prison, but her reach extended beyond those walls. And she'd made it clear, this wasn't over. Oliver had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. And this time, he wouldn't be reactive. This time, he'd be strategic. Because he'd learned something from Irene's mistake. Revenge worked best when your enemy never saw it coming. He smiled grimly. She wanted to destroy what he loved most. Let her try. Oliver Callahan had spent years exposing truth. Now he'd use those same skills to ensure Irene Henderson learned one final lesson. Some people couldn't be broken. Some people fought back. And when they did, they won absolutely. Ready, buddy? Ready, daddy. They went to the park. Jake laughed on the swings, raced other children, scraped his knee, and recovered with the resilience of youth. Oliver watched him, memorizing every detail. Whatever came next, whatever Irene was planning, he'd be ready. Because he was Oliver Callahan, and he'd already survived the worst betrayal imaginable. Anything else was just details. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.